Okay, hello and welcome back. I don't know what's going on with my Wednesdays, they're going crazy. I may have to change what day I stream during the week. But for today, we have Our Life Beginnings and Always. Continuing with the Baxter DLC. Oh, no, sorry, that was something else entirely. No, yeah, here we go. Okay, the last one, we got to see a bit more of what's going on under Baxter's facade. He had just returned from a trip to visit with some family friends, and he wanted to go out for drinks, date things. And it turns out he is not a morning person, and the first date with him did not go well, at least in his eyes. So he wanted to do another date, and he kind of went, in some ways he went over the top. I mean, it was cool and everything, but I didn't say it at the time, but it kind of felt like he was overcompensating for what he thought the first date went like. And so, yeah, that's not fun. So we got to definitely see more of who Baxter is underneath the facade he presents to everyone. Thanks to seeing him before noon. So we have 2 more moments to play, and then we'll start going through the epilogue. Considering how long the Derek epilogue went, it's probably going to take a couple streams to get through it, maybe 3. Because I did kind of a marathon stream for the first part of Derek's epilogue, and it put a strain on my voice. I don't want to do that again. So at least 2, maybe 3, depending on how much there is, because you're kind of wrapping things up. So maybe at most 5 more streams. I do have some demos planned. The company that did Arcade Spirits, both the first original game and the sequel, The New Challengers, is releasing the demo of their next game, which is not related to Arcade Spirits at all. It's called Penny Larceny Gig Economy or something like that. I'm blanking on the name, but they're releasing the demo for that tomorrow. I'm thinking of streaming that either tomorrow or Tuesday, not Wednesday. I'm going out to visit a friend Wednesday, so I won't be able to stream then, but I will be back by Saturday, so I should be able to stream next Sunday, for sure. I don't know when I'm going to get back to Mass Effect. It seems like everything is conspiring to keep me from playing that. My brain isn't part of that, I confess. I guess I'm a little worried about actually continuing the story for Mass Effect. I just need to bully my brain into letting me do it. Somehow. But yeah, I'm going to play the demo for Penny Larceny. And then there's another game that I played the demo for a while back, and they've just announced the release date for that game. So I didn't actually play that demo on stream, but I'm thinking of going ahead and playing that demo as well, because it has an interesting premise. So kind of looking forward to that. When Penny Larceny is released, I think it's next month, I will be playing that. Andromeda 6 has also announced the release of the next chapter, which will be July 1st, so I will be live streaming that chapter. And I think that's it. that's it for upcoming projects that I'm following. There's other games that I already have that I want to play, so we'll see what comes up after I do all the demos and catch up on existing games that I have. We'll see what I play next. So that being said, let's get started. Mountain. This is not our bedroom. Whose bedroom is this? No two summer evenings in Sunset Bird looked quite the same. Not downtown, not the beaches, and not on a street where the only change that anyone had seen in years was the arrival of a new tourist. Though you hadn't seen any stars in the sky, you knew the day was almost over from the sound of chirping crickets. Shadows of swaying branches were stretching across the grass. Well, probably. You hadn't gotten the chance to experience the sunset before you got pulled into whatever this was while trying to clarify your plans for tomorrow with Baxter. He paced back and forth between a pair of half-packed or half-unpacked, depending on how someone saw it, suitcases. Piles of folded clothes were abandoned on the bed. Just like a glass is half full or half empty, depending on your point of view. Oh, I forgot to grab my dice. Part of the reason the stream was late is I had to do some cooking before I could stream. Okay. Looks like there's 5 options, so here's great, I found a D10. There's also a book I've been meaning to read that I haven't gotten to yet. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 3. Laid out across the top half of the bed closest to the headboard. Baxter didn't mind where you were, happy to work around you, or more probably he just didn't notice. Accidentally threw a pair of rolled up socks in your face earlier. He apologized profusely for it. This wasn't the first time that you'd been in the condo. Baxter invited you over before, but so far it had only been the first floor. You were in the master bedroom now. Okay, that's what I thought. I thought we were in Baxter's room. As a kid, the condo was the equivalent of Fort Knox. No way in, and if someone unwanted did sneak inside, there was probably no way out. It just wasn't worth the risk. Being in that room was closer to a fantasy than it was reality, as much as someone could dream about being in a rental bedroom anyway. And yet, here you were, all thanks to Baxter, who didn't seem to realize the gravity of the situation. One of the doors to the armoire, his word for it, was ajar. Hangers rattled from the excessive force Baxter used to remove a few of his jackets. Honestly, you weren't sure why he packed them at all. It never got cold enough anywhere in Southern California to wear outerwear during the winter, never mind the summer. Winter, yes, I do sometimes wear a jacket. Though this past winter, I think most of the time I just wore a flannel shirt over my regular shirt. But yeah, it can get that cold. And yet he still brought them, no matter how much he was convinced otherwise. Maybe just a result of growing up somewhere freaking cold. There's a reason I don't want to move up to Idaho with my twin.
So?
It will be cooler in temperature, but just barely. While we won't be seeing any snow, I would suggest you bring a jacket and a sturdy pair of shoes. He pulled another zipper on one suitcase, peering into its contents, but not deeply investigating for long before he moved to the next thing, a drawer filled with nothing that he abruptly shut. He waded past the only part of his wardrobe that remained neat and in place, formal clothes. The suit he wore to the interactive play was perfectly arranged for use at any minute, in case there was another regal emergency. Baxter hesitated before leaving that be. His fingers grazed the top of the comforter as he passed. "Jules, if you would?" He moved aside as he wove through an increasingly intricate disaster area to look for something else that he hadn't made clear to you. It seemed that up until now, Baxter had been living out of his suitcases, which wouldn't ordinarily strike you as a problem, till he said he needed at least one of them to be empty. If only so that he could relocate his things from one to the other. He was certain that he'd need no more than an afternoon to pack before you arrived. But there were some things in this world that not even the likes of Baxter Ward could handle with grace and composure. Mornings were one, personal organization was another. So another flaw in Baxter Ward. Interesting.
I apologize.
He stopped in place. The corners of his eyes softened as he turned to you, brows knit together even as he busied his hands with folding a pair of pants, only to immediately throw it into the suitcase. I realize this can't be terribly entertaining. I'm okay. It really wasn't really a bother. You'd come of your own volition and knew that he'd be doing what he'd be doing while you were here. Besides, if there was trouble, you'd have gone home. He was a warrior. That is one of your charm points. In for a penny, in for a pound. He chuckled, shaking his head with quiet amusement. Content with your reply, he went back to unconsciously constructing a labyrinth of his possessions. You wondered how he fit everything into 2 suitcases to begin with. This entire situation made about as much sense as anything else around him, which was to say that maybe a quarter of it followed any linear train of thought. That's something that my twin has said, is that she's probably the one who would make the most sense of anything my mom organized or filed, because she and mom have a similar mental process to it that the rest of us don't share. The rest left much to be desired. Baxter had a tendency to work through things in a sort of circuitous sense, his own logic that he used to explain things as a matter of fact. So much so that you couldn't help but just take him on his word, even if the details only made themselves clearer later. What was happening now was even more convoluted than normal. At first point, Baxter would very suddenly announce he was going on a vacation away from his vacation. Didn't he already do that? Or that was actually a trip. A 3-day and 2-night jaunt to a mountain lodge a handful of hours away by his judgment. Plans were already underway as soon as he figured out where he was staying in California. It made sense if he was trying to get more bang for his buck for his experience in the area, but that wasn't the main reason. The second point is a family tradition happening without his family. He and his parents always went to the Rockies in the summer, except this time he was staying in California. Baxter decided to make a trip out to the mountains here regardless. Actually, speaking of the Rockies, something my dad was talking about at dinner a couple nights ago, he pointed out that on the East Coast, the borders of the various states follow the Appalachians. Like the borders split the Appalachian Mountains. But here on the West Coast, if you look at the borders of California, you'll notice that they encompass the entire Rockies, and that's because of the gold rush. They wanted to ensure that all the gold stayed in the state. And then there was a silver rush in Nevada next door. And that was also fine, except he wasn't prepared for the trip at all. You would have thought that someone else planned when and where it happened with the way he was rushing around the condo, trying to pack and trying to remember what to pack. At point 3, the most peculiar, he rented a second room in the lodge, despite coming here alone and to visit no one in particular. He did have some acquaintances in the state, but none of them were people he wanted to take a trip with. Audaciously, after explaining the situation, he asked you to take up the free room without missing a beat. You, a person who dated him for all of half a second. A couple's trip was the kind of thing that's more appropriate for months down the line, something to cement a relationship as steady. But apparently being together at all was plenty enough for Baxter. The weekend was free and your moms were able to accept the idea of you going. Going up to the mountains to stay in a lodge was a cool opportunity. It wasn't the kind of trip you and your family took, nor me. I've been up to the mountains, and even when there was snow up there, but I've never actually stayed in a mountain lodge. Almost forgot to put my phone on silent. Not that you've taken many trips since your breaks got busier and Liz moved away, so the prospect of traveling anywhere farther than the city was exciting. Negotiating with your moms went better than expected. They hadn't vetoed it immediately because you were an adult, but they weren't excited about the idea. It was one thing if you were going on a trip with the usual cast of suspects, but Baxter, a guy you met basically the other day, well, that depends on what order you play everything. He was polite and well-spoken, however. Your moms didn't know his parents, a rule that you thought was obsolete once you were in high school, but not so when it came to overnight trips. They eventually gave their blessing when Liz took your side in the discussion. She was convinced by the fact that you'd be staying in an entirely separate room to him. Honestly, this last one, having a second room just because seemed like a Baxter thing to do. Baxter's hands stalled over the suitcase he was bringing on the trip. He brushed back his hair into place, turning to the side to search for another misplaced necessity.
Of course.
I thought there was a possibility I might make friends during my stay here. There was no guarantee, of course. I wouldn't hope to make any presumptions there. His gaze wandered, lips tightening at the corners of his mouth involuntarily. His contemplative expression faltered as he looked up from his suitcase to you. But I thought that if I did, then would the trip not be made exceptionally better with company? If not, then so be it. Acquiring a room is the difficult part. A reservation needs to be made weeks in advance, whereas canceling one only needs a notice of 48 hours or more. It's taken off the bill, no questions asked. Realistically, I would only need 2 days to know if I was going alone or with company.
See?
That was the case with you, was it not? You're so over the top, you know that? Well, I'm glad you're so accommodating about it. I hate for you to lose a deposit. I really should have known. Of course you do that. Again, implying that I'm predictable? I'm wounded. Predictable in how you do things no one else would do. I suppose I can live with that. It just goes to show that we're figuring out how his brain works. Baxter went back to packing, though suitcases looked to be middling in quantities more now than they'd been earlier in the evening. Ah! He glanced over his shoulder at you, a black shirt folded in his hands as neatly as any store display you'd seen in your life. This might not be an ideal time to ask, but as we are speaking about the trip, I did want to ask where your personal boundaries lie, Jules. I am deeply appreciative of your mother's approval. What I am comfortable with may not mirror what they are comfortable with. You only need to say so if you are in agreement with their preferences, but if not, Baxter had a tendency to act a lot older than he actually was. It was times like this, when he smirked entirely too mischievously, that you were reminded he was barely any older than you.
Well...
I may forget by the time we get there. You chuckled to yourself. Yeah, of course he'd add that caveat. Because, I mean, what they do at the lodge, there's no one to stop them. Moms were hoping Liz could come along too, so I wouldn't be alone. You didn't look surprised by the suggestion, apparently aware of how it must have and certainly did come off your parents to invite their youngest on an overnight trip. But she argued I wasn't going out of state, and I'm not still a kid. I just have to call Liz every day. I mean, call. She won't let me get away with texting. If I don't, she said she'll call the hotel instead, and the police and anyone with a phone number to report that Pepe Le Pew was on the loose. Baxter snorted. Not laughed, full on snorted. He covered his mouth, quickly avoiding your gaze as he had to resist the urge to laugh harder. You didn't know whether he'd seen the original cartoons or one of the more recent uses of the character, but he definitely got the reference. That's hilarious. I was prepared to give your sister my thanks for convincing your mothers, but it appears everyone has notes on my manner of dress these days. Yeah, Mom joked that those old-fashioned black and white striped jumpsuits inmates wore would match her hair, you know, if Liz did call the police on you. How clever. Is a black and white tie out of vogue, Jules? You aren't wearing a tie. Trying to suppress the grin was nigh impossible, especially after reliving the conversation about his vague resemblance to an aggressively forward skunk and a criminal. Baxter chuckled as he put away another pair of pants, the number of which he'd long lost count of as he went back and forth.
Charming.
Your family is quite charming, and I do agree. That is only fair. Try to keep in touch with them while you're away. I'll trust you care for my fate enough to do that much. Yeah, when I went on, I visited Washington, D.C. In college, and during the trip, I made sure to call home every evening. Just to let them know I was okay, because this was before unlimited texting, so it was easier just to call. So I get it. I understand completely. So I think one of these two. Ooh, or we could do this. Are you going to keep in touch with your parents? It is my intention, though I couldn't promise it would be every day. The itinerary for the trip was straightforward enough that Baxter didn't need to look at his laptop to read the details. He kept to his work on the suitcases. Check-in wasn't until 4 p.m. at the earliest, and the drive wasn't so significant that you'd be going for as long as you'd feared. So the plan was to leave at noon, find dinner somewhere in the area when you got there, then check into the lodge in the evening. The first day would be getting there. The second would be exploring the area in earnest, and the third would be taking the morning easy before checking out at noon to head back home. Well, home for you, vacation home for Baxter. It's perfectly reasonable according to him. He wouldn't be overextending himself to prepare on either of the big driving days, and you'd have a good amount of time in the lodge. Besides, if he drove that much early in the morning, you were pretty confident that you wouldn't make it back in one piece. Upon further inspection of Baxter's own supplies, there were a few things left to pack and a few more things you needed to buy. I don't suppose we'll need any formal wear, really. But on the off chance that we have dinner at a restaurant that necessitated that, I think you'll be okay with that. But I'll see you tomorrow, Baxter. I gotta pack too. Good luck. As you started to make your way out of the master bedroom, his head snapped up.
See you.
Oh, of course. I will see you tomorrow, Jules. Have a good evening. Morning came uneventfully, save the final warning from your family about how they deploy a full-fledged investigation team the minute that something seemed off. You agreed that you would call daily, but it didn't do much to dissuade the endless worrying. But it didn't pull any punches either, least of all after your family helped you load your things into the back of Baxter's car. Ma and Liz pulled you into a hug as Mom shut the trunk with a click of finality before she joined in the squeeze. Don't forget that I'm watching him, Jules. I'll come get you if you need me to. Just say the word. Doesn't matter when, okay? You embraced the hug as they all tugged you in close. Ma and Mom planted a kiss each on your cheeks. They were just reminding you because they cared, not because they didn't trust you. But you wouldn't be going anywhere if they didn't let you go. Liz grinned, pulling you into another hug anyway. She squeezed your shoulders.
What a pickle.
I trust Jules to do their job, but Baxter, you'll be careful with our child, won't you? You couldn't see what their faces looked like because of the way they held you. However, you could hear the apprehension in Baxter's tense laugh.
I can do that.
Of course, you have my word, ma'ams. A perfectly gentlemanly response from him, as always. As you were freed, Baxter made his way to the passenger side. He opened the door for you with a sweep of his arm. Bye! Moms and Liz waved you off and you slid inside the car, shutting the door behind you. As soon as the seatbelts clicked, the engine roared to life. You reversed out of the driveway and rumbled away from your neighborhood to the freeway. The familiar sight of Sunset Bird eventually gave way to Prism Vista City, then to the open space between here and there. You couldn't smell the salt in the air anymore, and for a moment it felt odd to remember that there weren't any beaches everywhere that you went, even in the same state. Oh no, I don't live near the beach, and I'm in Southern California myself, like I said. The radio set to classical music gave a nice backtrack to Baxter's storytelling of other trips he'd taken with his parents up to the Rocky Mountains. Those memories gave an idea of what to expect when he arrived at the cabin, even though he glazed over some of the details. He even mentioned odder experiences, one of which included getting chased across the river by what he and his family thought was a bear, but turned out to be a particularly chubby dog who wanted to be friends. He contributed to the conversation that you recently went on a trip with Cove to Nevada to visit his mom. Yep. Baxter listened as attentively as you'd listened to him. He'd been to Nevada before, but the heat there was miserable for someone like him. The ride was as smooth as it could be, except for the occasional congestion of traffic. That was always inevitable this time of year. Baxter wasn't the only tourist. Nope. Eventually, the massive freeways came down to 2 lanes as the elevation grew steeper and steeper. Yeah, I wondered why we didn't move into the mountains, and aside from the cost, Mom just doesn't want to deal with the snow. Roads cut through canyons, giving a scenic view. You still texted your friends and family between conversations and sightseeing until you lost signal. By the time you hit your first official checkpoint, it was late in the day. You stopped at a roadside diner for a bite to eat before finishing the last leg of the trip. You offered to drive, but Baxter waved it off. It's already enough that you came at all. Making conversation with you also made it less of a dull task, so he didn't mind. And maybe it was better that way, since Baxter was renting it. If anything did happen, it'd complicate matters if he wasn't driving. That's true. After the short final stretch, the car rolled to a stop at the front of a massive log hotel. It towered over your head when you stepped out of the vehicle. Baxter handed the keys to the attending valet. The lodge was somehow both rustic and fancy at the same time. For an oversized wooden cabin, the doors had big, elaborate wrought handles that you were sure must have cost a pretty penny. It appears that we have arrived. Baxter rounded his side of the car with bags in hand, smiling comfortingly as he stood there empty-handed and staring at the building. How snazzy! You didn't expect Baxter to laugh at what you said. It was a pretty apt description of the place, but he shook his head demurely.
Lovely.
I wasn't aware anyone still used the word. Amazing. Both carried your things into the lobby. You hadn't brought enough with you that you'd need to make a second trip. And after all that consternation in his bedroom, Baxter had managed to shave everything he needed down to one bag and suitcase. The lobby was as big as the front of the building suggested. Light piano music tinkled in the background. Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. An untraditional chandelier hung from the ceiling, sunlight shining through glass doors and reflecting onto the carefully cut stonework. That is, oh wow, that is gorgeous. Just taking it all in. I've been watching builders on YouTube, and now my brain is thinking about all the processes that must have gone into making this thing, and they definitely had, something like this definitely had to be designed, and wow, just wow. A fireplace burned in the far end of the lobby for whom you could only presume to be guests, but despite all the chairs and couches available for them, there was scarcely a soul. It wasn't cozy, not in the way that you'd expected it to be, given Baxter only described it as a mountain lodge. It was big and impressive, and even the stairwells seemed more fitting for a medieval castle than a homey cabin in the woods. To one side, the front desk was occupied by staff who were busy with helping a large party. We may be waiting a while. Why don't we set these down? He tugged at the strap for the crossbody bag he had over his shoulder and lifted the suitcase in his hand, gesturing for you to follow to the nearest open seating area, which was all of them. Footsteps echoed in the cavernous room, and when your bags hit the ground, the sound of that did too. Baxter opted to set his bags in one of the chairs instead of sitting. He'd been stuck in the car for so long. Yeah, sometimes when you've been sitting for a long time, it's just nice to just stand for a while. He didn't make a point of stretching his legs, though, ostensibly because it would have looked overly casual for a man such as him.
What do you think?
So now that you've gotten a look, what's your opinion on our temporary abode? Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Let's go with this one. My apologies, Jules. It wasn't my intention. Our rooms will be hopefully less ostentatious. They will at least not be so overwhelming in scale. Forgot to read the response. Honestly, I feel a little out of place here. Thanks. Of course. He turned his attention to the front desk, though the situation hadn't improved at all. There were no signs of it clearing up now or in the near future. Jules, would you mind if I made a phone call? I am considering making the obligatory phone call to my mother. I do not often keep my parents appraised of my day-to-day life, but I do believe they will be glad to know I arrived at this secondary vacation. His gaze dropped to the floor as his hand idly sneaked into his pocket to fish out his phone. His formerly polite smile became crooked. I am not so bad a son that I cannot grant them that. Sure, go ahead. Thank you. It won't be more than a few minutes. And I'll have the chance to finally mention the lovely individual accompanying me. His teasing wasn't something to be missed, but it warmed your heart to know that Baxter considered your relationship meaningful enough to be mentioned even in passing to his parents. Officially withdrawing his phone, Baxter promptly brought up his contacts and made the call. A hand rested on his hip while the other held the device to his ear. His head craned back towards the high ceiling as he waited the dial tone before a voice too soft for you to hear, but loud enough for you to register, greeted Baxter. Hello, Mother. It's nice to speak with you. We've arrived at the hotel. The drive went well. He glanced over his shoulder at you before lightly pressing his index finger to his lips, as if to hush you before he could think of saying something. You couldn't help but wonder if she caught on to the we, considering Baxter came to the state alone in the first place.
Yeah.
Yes, I have Jules with me, my neighbor here. Of course, that is the greatest understatement of our relationship. They are quite special. Um, Not this one. That's a little too rude. Yeah, let's go with this one. Tell your mom I said hi. His soft brown eyes lit up with a new warmth, having not expected me to take interest. Jules says hello, Mother. He nodded as she said something in response to him. However, his attention didn't move from you. As the conversation continued on her end, he lightly covered his phone with his hand. She says hello too, Jules. He smirked while his mother continued on in his silence. You weren't honestly sure that he was listening enough to have caught what she said. This was the closest approximation you'd ever gotten to the vague concept that was Baxter's parents, and it was such a small thing, watching as he spoke to one of them over the phone. It felt so radically different than it did with your other friends. You knew Kyra and Mr. Holden, just like you knew Derek, Randy, and Terry's parents. I mean, in the Derek DLC, you get to spend more time with his parents, obviously. And we at least met Randy's parents at her birthday party. And presumably we met Terry's parents at some point while hanging out with her. All you'd heard about Baxter's parents, other than that they were educated and old-fashioned, was that they didn't mind sending Baxter off to Sunset Bird for the summer, by himself. Granted, he is 19 and technically an adult. They wouldn't see him this season, and so you wouldn't see them. You had to wonder if someday you'd get the chance to meet them or speak to them directly. Maybe in the epilogue? It didn't seem like a priority for Baxter. You were only dating for a little while though, so maybe it was enough to just let them know that you existed in the first place. We'll find out. After another few hmms and yeses, Baxter's attention shifted to the front desk, which was slowly being vacated by the previous group. Ah, Mother, this was lovely, but I do have to take my leave. Take care.
Oh, yes.
You too. And with only a brief goodbye, he hung up and pocketed his phone. He turned towards you, picking up his bag and suitcase. Shall we go and check in? Yeah. You trailed after him with your own luggage. The hotel receptionist smiled from behind a wide counter, her eyes somewhat weary from the day's work. So I'm assuming this is the front counter, because it has what looks like computer screens over here. Plus, there isn't anything remotely similar over here. You could relate to the exhaustion of dealing with a large mass of needy people and sent a silent wish that the rest of her day would be uneventful. Good evening. The receptionist nodded, offering her own greeting in reply before asking if you were both checking in. Exactly, and I appreciate your assistance in doing so. The reservation should be for 2 rooms under Baxter Ward. Handing over his driver's license and credit card, the receptionist made quick work of their computer system and slid 2 pairs of plastic cards through a machine. You were going to be in room 194. Baxter's going to have the room next to you, 193. She picked up a map and drew a few arrows and lines. You were directed to take a left and head up the elevator or take the stairs to the 2nd floor. With keys and a map handed off, you and Baxter departed from the front desk. So, did you want to take the elevator or the stairs? You realized Baxter didn't immediately follow. You turned back to him as he caught up, gesturing for you to wait. He dug out one of his key cards and offered it to you.
Now.
Elevator. Here. It may not be necessary, but I'm happy to let you have it in case. We'll just accept it wordlessly. Only fear that we return the favor. Baxter gratefully took your card in hand. Please have your good faith in the matter. The executive decision was made to take the elevator up to the next floor, given all the bags. Truthfully, with only a night's worth of clothes and supplies, they weren't that heavy. I prefer to take the elevator up, because going up is a lot more exhausting than going down. Gravity works. What was more, it was only a floor up, but they'd installed an elevator for a reason, hadn't they? Exactly. It'd be a shame not to put their hard work to use. The halls of the hotel were wide. It was easy enough for 2 people to pass through beside each other, though you and Baxter had to sidestep to make room for others occasionally. As you approached the end of the path where your rooms sat beside one another, Baxter withdrew his keycard and held it against the digital lock with a fluid, practiced motion. Would it be alright if we were to meet later this evening? It was a long drive, and I, at least, am in no rush to hurry off to the next activity. You waved your hand to dispel any concerns, both real and imagined. Sure, that's fine. I'll see you soon.
Excellent.
Take care, neighbor. He winked, laughing as he disappeared inside of his room and shut the door with a click. Tapping your card against the lock, he followed suit. In comparison to the hotel foyer, the room was cozier. Not by much, but it was much less grand in scale. So yeah. Looks like lots of still lifes. So we have paintings of flowers and a vase of flowers. That looks very comfy. I kind of want to just jump on it. Or curl up in this chair, especially if it's a recliner. When we were out of electricity a couple weeks ago, I went to sit in the recliner I have in my room. I couldn't put the footrest up because it's electric. And that's a gorgeous view just from what we can see from the window. One wall was laid precisely with wooden planks. This wall here. At the center of the room, the headboard of the single king-size bed was situated by some nondescript painting. It didn't seem cramped, in part because of the glass doors that led out onto a balcony and because of the nearby windows, which meant more light came into the room. It was bright even without the lamps on. In the breeze of the quiet evening up in the mountains, the branches waved to say hello. That's cute. I like that turn of phrase. That's sweet. Setting down your stuff, you started unpacking toiletries and clothes before searching for a plug at the nightstand for your phone charger. As you unpacked and the sunrise lit further out of the room, it occurred to you that you also owed a call to your loved ones. A promise was a promise. You meant to call her earlier when you were checking in, but it slipped your mind in between everything. Liz was still waiting. It didn't take more than a couple of clicks to your contacts to pull up Liz's number. She'd been one of the last people you were texting on your way up before the signal cut out in the first place. The phone rang for a second before his sister's voice came through the other line. There's an exaggeration to her tone, a sense of suspicion.
So?
Jules, this better be you and not some impersonator. I'm on to you, Ward, if that is in fact your real name. J'excuse. So this is what I get for calling.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely, and since the actual Jules would complain about it, you're real. The bit of French there does have me skeptical, though. That sounds like Baxter to me. Laughter bubbled up to the surface with Liz joining in on her end. That was exactly what I wanted you to think. No more questions, Your Honor. There was no way of knowing for sure, but you were pretty confident she was rolling her eyes. Uh-huh, I'm not buying that you suddenly have the capacity for three-dimensional chess. Isn't 3D chess normal chess? Yeah, that's definitely you. Moving on, I'm glad you got there safe and sound enough that you're keeping up with me. I still don't know about that Baxter guy. He's too formal and stiff for someone younger than me. 3D chess isn't necessarily that the chess pieces are three-dimensional, but that they move up and down as well as back and forth. The plane that you play in is three-dimensional rather than two-dimensional. But I guess he got you there in one piece. How's the lodge? It's kind of overwhelming. Baxter fits right in here, but I don't know. I'm not very comfortable looking around the building so far. Aw, Jules. It's okay. I'll get used to it, I think. I can manage for a few days.
That's fine.
Alright, well, offer still stands. Call me if you need me to come get you. Thanks. Your older sister listened with the intensity of someone still handling an interrogation. This will do. Just make sure to have some fun for the rest of us, alright? Take pictures. Mom's already started asking why you haven't sent any. They want to see the inside of a car?
Right?
That's what I said! Yes, they are siblings. I love it. Conversation trailed on longer, Liz weighing in on speakerphone with what had been going on at home since you'd left. She mentioned that Cove stopped by at some point to drop something off for him and Dad and told her to tell you that he said hi. Eventually Liz tapered off, and at the mention of her own sleepiness, she helpfully reminded you to go and get some rest before adding that you need to call her again tomorrow. The phone was promptly tossed aside and Pedro preparing for the night. Then a gentle knock came at your door. Baxter, presumably. Baxter correctly, as he was the only person standing there in the doorway once you opened it. Hi, come in. Bowing his head as he stepped inside, he offered her thanks for being quick with the invitation instead of making him stand in the hallway. Why wouldn't I invite him in? You came right in on time. I just wrapped up with Liz. How lovely. I'm sure that she was relieved to have heard from you alive and well. The curve of Baxter's smile widened when he took a quick look around your room. It couldn't be all that different from his own, but he regarded it as though it were. Maybe the decorations is slightly different? Oh, you can see the pictures a little better here with the evening lighting. Maybe it's because of the lamps being on. They're very nice lamps. I don't know why that occurred to me.
So?
It appears that you've settled in quite nicely. It's late, so I won't keep you, but I did want to discuss our plans for tomorrow. Feel free to enjoy yourself in the morning without worrying about accommodating me. It should be easy to explore the town if you want, but the lodge has amenities you could also try if you're interested. There's a gym around, I believe, along with a pool and a complimentary breakfast if you're up early enough for it. As for the afternoon, evening, and night, I'd be pleased if we could spend it together. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll meet up with you later. Baxter didn't do early mornings or mornings in general. It was no skin off your bones to let him sleep in, especially considering that this was supposed to be a vacation. Well, it was always a vacation for Baxter, but the rationale held. He was always so considerate of you that it stood to reason to do the same for him. Yeah, my friend who is not a morning person, I try not to get them up too early when I visit, but there's only so long I can just laze around. He nervously ran a hand through his hair before a semblance of his Baxter Ward patented confidence returned to his features.
I appreciate the understanding.
I thank you for your consideration. As for what we'll do tomorrow, how would you feel about a hike? There's a lovely trail that starts directly from here. It loops up and around the forest at the back, then returns us to where we started. It's a bit of a longer path, so we could pack a lunch with us to take on the way. I can have it ordered and delivered ahead of time. Let's go with this one. Going on a hike with Baxter sounded pretty entertaining. Let's do it. He smiled graciously. Baxter had his heart set on that outing, clearly. He made his day by joining the adventure.
Goodbye for today.
I look forward to it then. With that, Baxter took his leave after offering a quiet good night. There were a few hours left before he had to be in bed, so he settled in for the first night of what continued to be a surreal experience. It was spent peacefully, and then you were drifting into an equally gentle dream. The sun peeked through the sheer curtains the first part of the day to greet you as you woke in a sprawling bed that wasn't your own. So, it looks like it looks slightly different, maybe because this morning did not sunset. Also, it looks like it's zoomed in because we can only see one picture here, rather than both. And yeah, because of the light, we're only seeing part of the picture, so that's cool. That's a nice touch with the lighting. I don't know why I'm releasing this stuff. Getting up early was for morning people. Maybe a few more minutes, nothing urgent was happening, right? That was me this morning. I woke up and I knew I was awake, but I refused to get up right away. I just laid there. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, probably more passed before you considered leaving the safety of the sheets. But once you managed to unearth yourself from the blankets and wake up a bit, you went through your morning routine and considered the possibilities for the time that remained. Baxter wouldn't be meeting up with you until around the afternoon. Your growling stomach made the decision for you. The first thing on your agenda was getting breakfast. Me! That's me entirely. I'm always ready for breakfast when I get up. I have to have breakfast. I can't skip it. By the time your hunger was sated, Baxter hadn't contacted you. Water baby, so we're gonna find the pool. Didn't think swimming would be a likely possibility up in the mountains, but you were glad you brought your gear anyway. After making the trip to your room to get your things, you were able to find the pool. In retrospect, you didn't know how you missed it. The chlorine hit you before you even stepped into the room. Out before you stretched what looked to be an Olympic-sized pool, its water sparkling with cleanliness. It wasn't in your best interest to go for a serious swim, having just eaten and about to go on a hike later that afternoon, so you waited around in the shallow end. By the time 11 rolled around, your phone hummed with a new text from Baxter. It was as formally worded as ever. Good afternoon, Jules. I will be ready for our hike shortly. I hope the amenities were to your liking. It's been nice. See you soon. Wonderful. I've always enjoyed how responsive you are. I will be ordering lunch in the interim. I thought sandwiches might suit our activities for the day. It should be easy to bring along and fine to eat cold. I would advise staying Straying away from the panini for that reason, I'll send along the menu shortly. Let me know what you prefer. As promised, Baxter attached a perfectly formatted PDF with said options, which seemed increasingly more complex the lower you scrolled down the menu. There were options for next to everything: what bread, what fillings, what cheeses, what spreads. It was enough to make you forget what was available in a category as soon as you moved from one section to another. But you hastily made your decision with seconds still ticking by and texted your order to Baxter, who replied with a blushy, smiling emoji. An excellent choice. I'll be waiting in the lobby for the delivery then. Make your way down there as soon as you're able. Take care. After sending off that last text, you tucked your phone away and hurried to your room. You hurried to rinse off. After sending that last text, you hurried to rinse off and change before heading to your room. Okay, so that was just two different things. Okay. Good shoes were a must when it came to hikes, along with a full water bottle. With the weather and time of day being what it was, you hoped you might catch the last dregs of the cool morning air before the afternoon really set in. And plus, from what I remember, the weather tends to be cooler in the mountains. Maybe? Once you were satisfied you had everything that you'd need, you returned to the front of the hotel. The lobby was as cavernously vacant as ever, so it wasn't hard to find the back of a distinct head of black and white hair near the fireplace with a bag of what were potentially sandwiches. I imagine the lodge actually does brisk business during the winter. Yet you were certain it wasn't Baxter. It couldn't have been. I'm sure his shoes were black, the pants were dark gray, had a grayish bag too, which all aired to the side of monochromatic. But the shirt, his shirt, the man was wearing khaki? Oh my goodness. He looks so grumpy. Ah! Oh my goodness. It was as if you found a cryptid in the flesh. You never thought you'd see the day where Baxter Ward was wearing a color that wasn't, well, that he was wearing any color at all. Of course, you knew it wasn't actually a stranger with the same unique hairstyle and his body type, but it was hard not to joke about it. Baxter turned at the sound of your footsteps. Jules. He grinned, jaw tense. Baxter probably would have been more comfortable trotting around the lobby in nothing more than his presumably black and white underwear. He was the guy that described skinny dipping as invigorating, after all. Hi, do you need to change? Beige wasn't as shell-shocking as something that was, say, highlighter yellow, but on Baxter it might as well have been. He took a deep breath, a very deep breath. With his eyes closed and his hand unintentionally tightening his grip around the bag, his answer finally came out in the same exhale. I only brought one shirt that was suitable for a hike with me on this trip. I've been certain I wouldn't need more than that. He looked away, hand brushing through his hair again as he worked to find the words. After you left, I found this among my things. Baxter grimaced. He looked at the errant shirt as if he'd been hit with a splash from a mud puddle. And regrettably, I did not find anything else. This is the shirt I brought for outdoor activities. The face would have it that I only found out when there was no time to run out and get a replacement. Thus leaving me with a few remaining options: a formal button-down, one of my designer tops, silk pajamas, or he gestured to the khaki shirt with both finality and defeat. So you own it? Baxter shook his head emphatically. The light in his eyes betrayed his expression with some delight. That at least you found his misfortune entertaining enough to prod at.
Never.
I suppose I must have accidentally stolen it from a roommate. I don't know who else would own a khaki button-down other than that prep. My memories of the pound pack at dawn before I set out to California are hazy, to say the least. I had believed at the time that I took a pale gray, sturdy cotton shirt for occasions like this. The low lighting and my waning focus in the moment betrayed me. He would consider a betrayal. This is too funny. Of course, morning Baxter struck again. Sighing, he straightened the thieves' attire. If it was going to be unpresentable, it should at least be decently so. The sandwich bag fell against his hip as his eyes met yours. I must ask you to keep this a secret, Jules. Sure, but just know that I'll be saving this info as blackmail. He snorted, though the tension in his forehead relaxed at the suggestion.
Thank you.
At least you were considerate enough to call it blackmail. As unhappy with his predicament as he was, there was something undeniably sweet about the fact he hurried to make it at the risk of keeping you waiting. The collar of his shirt was crumpled and parts of it were wrinkled, likely from the hasty packing after he finally discovered the horrible mistake. The latter couldn't be fixed without an iron, but at least the collar could be smoothed over. He reached out instinctively to fix it, incidentally brushing gently against the side of his neck as he straightened out the crease. Pale skin flushed with sudden warmth, pinking as your fingertips fell against the hollow of his throat. His Adam's apple bobbed, his breath catching in his throat. Okay, there we go. He blushed! He blushed! His embarrassment managed to ease into laughter. Baxter covered his mouth to stifle the chuckles that echoed through the empty foyer. You tried your best to keep from cackling any more than you already did at his poor beige-influenced expense. Well, regardless of what color I may be wearing, beige. He raised an eyebrow before directing a pair of rolled eyes your way. Right. We should still be able to continue with our plans. It isn't as though anyone will see me in public like this. Who will the trees tell? Nobody, but remember, I'll always know it happened.
You know.
Contrary to belief, my ego will endure. Besides what? He turned to face you then as the first genuine smile you'd seen out of him all day curved on his lips. His free hand fell solemnly on your shoulder by comparison and gave it a gentle squeeze. No one will ever believe you. This is true. Shaking your head, you adjusted the straps of your bag on your shoulders. Okay, if you're done. Baxter gave you a world-weary glance as if to say he was already greatly limiting how much he could have gone on about it. We can head on out. Let's. He packed away the sandwiches into the bigger, properly gray bag, truly ending his lament about the state of his attire. Once he was certain the food was not liable to be flattened, Baxter gestured for you to follow him out of the hotel and onto the nearby trailhead behind the building. Oh, wow. Wow. This is gorgeous. I wish I lived closer to some trails like this. I'm just, wow. This is, I don't know who they got for the art, but they did good. Wow. The path initially was paved and clearly marked. As you continued at a leisurely pace, it eventually narrowed into a larger swath of evergreen trees and beaten ground. The mountain air was sharper than the sea breeze you were so used to. Instead of salt, you could smell pine in between the wafts of liberally applied sunscreen. Oh, I love the smell of pine. My mom does too, but unfortunately she's allergic to it. With a pleasant breeze and a coolness drawn from a stream, the weather was more than ideal for a hike. Tree boughs provided cover too, hiding you both from the high afternoon sun. Yeah, so we used to get a real pine tree for Christmas every year. But eventually, between my mom's allergy and just the cost of buying a tree every year, my parents decided to get a fake tree. I think it started when my grandmother passed away and we just took her fake tree that she'd been using. But eventually that one died, so we got our own. And I think we've been using the same one ever since. Eventually we'll have to replace it. But it does come with the lights pre-installed, so we don't have to worry about stringing the lights. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Foliage rustled at your feet as your shoes kicked up the fallen turf. The path wasn't big enough for you to walk side by side, so Baxter took the front. After some prolonged silence, he spoke up.
Perfect.
I am glad that this trail matches what I saw online. It seemed like an easy hike as it lacks steep inclines. The path ahead is clear. That's not really a hike, it's more of a scenic stroll. Oh, that's too bad. A more invigorating trail would have been great. I'll have to keep that in mind then. He hastened his walk as if to create more of a challenge for you in lieu of a more arduous path. That worked. You're looking pretty comfortable on the trails. Do you hike a lot? He turned his gaze up to the tree canopy, considering the question for a moment as leaves crunched underfoot and the path sloped uphill. I don't go often, but I am quite used to it if that's the question. I am not sure if I'd consider it among my personal hobbies, but I'm not averse to it.
I love it.
I welcome the opportunity, in fact, when it is available. Me too. It's cool that we have that in common. I agree. It is a wonderful thing to have something that we can enjoy together. Though I would not call myself a mountaineer proper. He chuckled, stopping in place at a partial ascent. Baxter glanced over his shoulder at you and watched for any signs of difficulty with your footing. I may be fit to impress on a day hike similar to this, but I knew some people who truly could call themselves wilderness aficionados. The types that you could see in a reality survival show, I'd wager, in the Alaskan wilds, fighting a bear for salmon. You make such beautiful pictures with your words. Thank you. Now, speaking of the Murrays, the parents and their 2 teens who would regularly go on backpacking trips that would last days, and they sleep outside in the middle of the woods. No, thank you. No, thank you. Nope. We did camp out a few times when I was younger, but no. I prefer to have sturdy walls between me and bears.
Certainly.
What's more, they enjoyed rappelling down cliff sides. Certainly they had safety gear, but I can't fathom willingly going to such degrees. Nope. No thank you. Or rather, I might be more apt to say that I can't imagine surviving them. Baxter continued on about some of the Murray's exploits and a little of his own reservations about anything else under the sun, including scuba diving. Though you had plenty to say about that between Mr. Holden's entire business and living so close to the ocean. But it wasn't long before you decided to stop for lunch. It had already been a few hours since you had breakfast, and Baxter hadn't eaten anything yet for the day. There wasn't a picnic table along the path, so the task fell to you to find somewhere to take a break. It happened to be the case you saw a nice and sunny spot with some nice flat rocks first. How about we take a lunch break over there? Following your raised arm, Baxter eventually nodded in agreement. The 2 of you headed over to the stones and shrugged off your packs. After digging through his bag's contents, he produced the 2 sandwiches and handed over yours. The sound of crinkling beeswax paper unwrapping announced the start of lunch. My family went to the Redwoods when I was a kid. Have you been? Baxter shook his head, taking another bite out of his meal as he bid you to continue. We went in an RV with the Holdens and had sandwiches then, too, but a bird stole Mr. Holden's and he chased after that bird like it was his last meal.
Really?
Mom tried to tell him that we had literally 1,000 ingredients to make more, but he was so sure he could get it, so he kept chasing after it, and the story trailed on longer than you intended, but Baxter was interested every step of the way. While stuffing your face, keeping up a conversation fell off the list of priorities. Baxter followed your lead and dedicated himself to his own sandwich. Real silence was avoided thanks to the delightful world around you. The rustle of leaves, the bubbling of water, even a small songbird flitted by overhead before landing on a nearby branch. It seemed to stare directly at you and chirped. It was so picturesque that it belonged on a postcard, for the mundane activity of eating lunch was almost too much. Could one be overly serene? Thanks for letting me come here with you.
Of course.
I am all too happy that you accepted my invitation. He polished off the sandwich first and then wiped his fingers on a paper napkin. He had been certain to pack those. Of course Baxter would pack napkins. When I would take lunch to school with me, it took me a while to remember to pack a napkin or a paper towel to wipe my fingers after I finished eating. Even though I tended to pack sandwiches and chips, which would almost certainly require cleaning my fingers. Perhaps I'm being fanciful, but this feels almost dreamlike. Huh. I understood where it's coming from. Up on this mountain, your everyday life felt so far away. It was far away. You traveled for miles to be here. This time you both were far from home and in the middle of the unfamiliar. It was nature's domain, untamed in a different way than your experiences with the ocean. I know what you mean. Baxter reached out and grabbed a leaf from the ground, twirling it around with his fingers. Exactly. As you worked on finishing your own lunch, your beige-clad companion laid down on the flat rock you'd set up as your little picnic area. I love that they keep poking fun at the fact that he's wearing beige. His hands were folded over his stomach and his eyes closed. Your ears strained for any signs of his snoring, half convinced that he really put himself back to sleep. Didn't seem the type to, but you never really knew. Enjoying yourself there? Baxter murmured in reply. At first he thought he might say something witty back, but he stretched out his legs instead. Let me lie here a moment. The sun's quite comforting. You're free to join me. What could you say to that? Nothing. Instead, you did bask in the warmth of the sun alongside him. He laughed when you jokingly mentioned that you understood why lizards got such a kick out of the behavior. We went out to dinner last night because today is Father's Day, so we went out to celebrate early so we wouldn't have to deal with other people doing the same thing tonight. So we couldn't find one of our cats, my cat, Shadow. But eventually, it turns out he was in our dining room window, which faces west. And, of course, it was getting on towards evening, so basically the sun was shining right on him. So he's basically basking in the sun. He likes to do that. There's a window in our garage that faces that direction too, and there's a pile of boxes right in front of it, and that's his favorite perch.
You know,
The forest that I grew up with had different foliage. Only 60% of the plants growing here only exist in this climate. How interesting. It certainly would be something, at least if there's any truth in it. He grinned like the Cheshire Cat, self-satisfied and smug. His eyes glittered with amusement. I entirely made that up off the top of my head. Aw, stinker. Although since I know truly nothing about California wildlife, it may reflect reality after all. Probably not, but I can't rule it out completely. You laughed at his nonsense. He was so blunt about it. At your mirth, his grin grew wider, and he regaled you with other fake nature facts. He spoke about the California mountain hare, the only North American rodent that ate a large diet of bees and was entirely made up by a man who normally dressed in monochrome. But the meal was over by that point. You did have a trek ahead before you could return to the hotel. Trash and scraps were thrown into the delivery bag. Baxter stuffed it into his normal bag.
good.
Leave no trace. Exactly. Good. Very conscientious. Thank you for not littering. Yep, looks like we got everything. With everything stowed away, the two of you slid off the rock and rejoined the path. Both you and Baxter were fully recharged from the lunch break. You continued the hike steadily, keeping a good pace. Without warning, Baxter rooted himself in the middle of the path. Oh, look at that! Jerked his head and followed his gaze. Further out on his side of the trail was the stream, following swiftly. But you immediately knew what part of the scene caught his attention. Laying across the banks, a tree had fallen to create a natural bridge. You stepped around him to get a better vantage point. The trunk had to be 3 feet thick and covered in vibrant green moss. Leaves had long fallen from the few remaining branches. Baxter's bright eyes stayed on it, and he grinned all the while.
Exciting.
One minute, please. I need to walk across that. It's too perfect to simply pass on by. I don't know. Took a large step and promptly left the path. A twig snapped. Let's follow him. Walking out the path made you infinitely glad that you weren't wearing flip-flops today. There was brush blocking the way everywhere. He chose to mimic most of Baxter's movements. Despite his excitement, he still paid attention to where he put his feet. He dodged what could have been poison ivy, and then had to limbo under a low-hanging branch between a couple of saplings. Baxter snagged his shirt on a thorn. Hold on. Carefully unhooked the fabric and saved it from tearing. Baxter craned his neck to inspect the shirt, visibly relieved that it was undamaged.
Glad to hear it.
Oh, I'm glad you decided to come with me on this fortuitous adventure. Finally, he skipped over some stones and then squeezed himself between a group of thick bushes. His efforts were surprisingly graceful. He is a dancer! Clambered on the rocks behind him and took a moment to assess the bushes yourself. Going all the way around would be a hassle. There was a small gap under one of the bushes, but unless you were prepared to crawl, you didn't think you'd fit. Followed Baxter's path, lightly bending a few branches out of your way. You got through it without any scratches. Now through the gauntlet, catching up with Baxter was easy. This close to the stream bank, it was mostly more stones and short grasses. Baxter solidly placed a foot on the trunk, suspended over it. He adjusted his weight, then rocked his heel to shake the bridge. The tree gave no sign of giving under pressure. No matter what he did, it wasn't budging.
Excellent.
The safety check complete, he gingerly lifted his other foot and stood fully on the collapsed trunk. Even if it was stuck, the wood had to be slick. Wet and round weren't an ideal combination. Her forehead crinkled. Baxter showed no concern for that and walked further along an inch at a time until he was above the water. One more move and he'd be in that river. Carefully climbed on. First you sat down, then pulled up your feet. The damp bark was unpleasant, especially on your knees as you first crouched. However, when you stood up, the tree stayed firm. He breathed a sigh of relief. He went across the stream with his arms out in light steps, heel, toe, heel, toe. It's almost like he was floating on air, his movement smooth and assured. Okay, let's roll the dice for this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5. You're unsteady on your feet, but managing to remain upright. Your stomach jerked as your unsteady stance started to hold you fully accountable to gravity. You snapped at your arms, wide and flailing, as you finished another step. It's not as easy as Baxter made it appear. Creeping along, you couldn't tell whether to look down or forward. Wasn't looking ahead better for keeping your balance, but the log beneath you was uneven. When you stepped on a particularly lush patch of moss, it squished under your feet. Sidestepping like a crab helped, but you still weren't safe. You switched back to copying Baxter and gritting your teeth through your tilting. You made it to the center of the tree, right over the heart of the stream. Unfortunately, this was where the wood was at its slickest. Ah! You shrieked as you barreled over. There was nothing to grab, and your shoes were losing traction on the moist tree. Baxter twisted on his heels at your panic. He saw you tipping to the side. You caught the alarm on his face before your attention shot to the water below you. His hands were on your shoulders in an instant. Baxter gritted his teeth and his hands shook even as his stance was stable. You're both at risk of going over the edge. Bull snatched onto his arm. Before the hike turned into a swim, you repositioned yourself, this time avoiding the danger zone. You let out a shaky sigh when you regained your balance. Baxter remained uneasy for you near your fall and properly offered a hand for you to take. I'm definitely going to take his hand and squeeze it tight. We're going to kiss him. You leaned closer to him, careful of both your positions on the tree bridge. It wouldn't do to smooch your boyfriend off a tree. He tilted your face towards you, giving you perfect access to your target. You kissed him on the lips, much to his delight. He kissed you back sweetly before pulling away with a smile. I am quite grateful for my impeccable balance in cases like this. How often can you really get into situations like this? Oh, you'd be surprised. Suddenly there was a splash in the stream below. A ripple spread across the water, but the cause of it remained a mystery. There was nothing to be seen. Baxter restored his attention to the log. He tapped on the trunk, kicking off a loose remnant of bark. We don't actually need to go all the way across. Nothing particularly enthralling is over there.
Bravo.
I've enjoyed our little tryst very much, but I believe this is the curtain call. All right. You were grateful you wouldn't have to go any further. You led the charge off of the tree as best you could anyway, Baxter's hand warm in yours. You both kept each other grounded until you actually reached the ground. That was magical. It truly was fantastical. Remember how at lunch I mentioned that this all reminded me of a dream? Up above the rushing water, standing in a sunbeam, deep in the woods, I cannot imagine a more picturesque scene. Back to the trail. You nodded and started squeezing your way past the vegetation your way. Baxter followed you for a change. Finally, the path was under your feet. It sure was faster than trekking directly through the overgrowth. On we go. As your hike resumed, Baxter's jaunty attitude stood out. This entire trip, he had seemed different, more lighthearted. Usually when he was in a playful mood, it was more teasing. He was still very controlled. But out here, now, it wasn't the same. Maybe because he was in the middle of nowhere, he felt extra free. Or maybe it was because he'd already broken character with his unintentionally stolen shirt. Or, and this was the strangest possibility to consider, maybe it was entirely normal for him to act like this, and you didn't know. Gradually it grew darker and darker. Less light made it through the canopy of leaves above you. The sun slipped behind the surrounding mountains. It was well into evening when you caught sight of the hotel. You've arrived.
To be honest,
Honestly, I am having many regrets. His tone was light and jokey, but there was something boldly truthful to his words. I should have reserved the rooms for much longer. Everything is ending much too soon for my taste. He rubbed a hand through his hair, exhaustedly sweeping it back into place. However, at this point, there is no helping it. Yeah. You return to the warm lights of the lobby, the plush red carpet squished in a strangely decadent way compared to how gross you felt from tromping around the woods all day. Baxter halted you mid-stride with a question. What are your plans now? You hadn't thought that far, but Baxter didn't pause long enough for you to answer. If you're willing, we could eat dinner together. For example, I have heard the room service here is divine. We could also go somewhere else, but I'd require a few minutes to change. I don't mind hiding away from the public with you. You discovered my evil plan. He sighed dramatically as he chuckled at his fake shame. I should have expected you to figure me out. My true desire is returning to the room and relaxing rather than cleaning up at this hour of the night. No worries, I'm not judging.
That's wonderful.
I appreciate it. Now, once we order food, then tonight will be perfect. Perhaps I'll have a salad? I swear, it's not because we have been surrounded by leaves all day. Your stomach gurgled at the mention of food. The new plan was just in time, and you headed straight up to Baxter's room. He led the way to a suite like the hotel was the back of his hand, though it was a simple layout. But under his confident guidance, you reached the destination and he dropped your bags on the floor. The carpet muffled the thump. Wait, is this my room or his room? Guys, it looks a lot like my room. Baxter spread his now free arms widely to welcome you in. Please take a seat wherever you'd like. Baxter moved towards the nightstand and scrounged up a pamphlet on hotel services. You sat down at the side table. What side table? This is just not in the frame, which is entirely possible. Baxter flipped through the booklet until he spied the menu. Found it. He joined you around the table and placed the menu down so both of you could read it. At a glance, most of the options were classic comfort foods that matched the cabin in the woods aesthetic that the hotel was going for. However, it also had a sprinkling of more high-end options to cater to a certain set of its clientele. It couldn't be understated how weird the concept of getting lobster in a hotel was. All entrees came with seasonal veggies and a homemade roll, in addition to 12 quick a side of mashed potatoes, fries, French onion soup, or a salad. Baxter was hemming and hawing as he did when spoiled for choice. You could only hope it wouldn't be as much of a struggle for him as choosing which ice cream to get. You considered the options for yourself and decided on full-size salad, shepherd's pie, pot roast, lobster, an oyster and scallop platter, a grilled cheese sandwich, tomato soup, turkey with gravy, bolognese, a risotto, steak, prime rib, the steelhead trout, lasagna, and gnocchi ball. So I know what risotto is. Well, I have seen it cooked on a cooking show. It was a big British family cooking showdown or something like that, and one of the competing families made risotto. But let's see, what is bolognese? It is so it's actually a type of sauce. Okay, so apparently I've been making spaghetti bolognese all my life. Well, ever since I started cooking. Okay. Shepherd's pie is basically, it's like a pot pie but with lamb. Since we have access to high-end stuff, maybe we should go with that. Personally, I don't care for lobster. I don't care for most seafood. Let's go with the oyster and scallop platter. As for the side, you picked your favorite of the list. It's me, so we're gonna go with fries, because I love fries. There's something sad on the menu for me, but that makes it easy. I'll get the risotto and a side salad. So you're getting your bowl of leaves after all. I am indeed. Baxter confirmed your order again, as well as repeating his own, before swanning over to the room phone. He dialed room service and placed the order promptly.
Goodbye.
Yes, thank you, goodbye. He hung up the call and sat down on the corner of the bed. He tapped his fingers on his leg. Suddenly, the muscles between my ribs are a little sore. And it sounded like I was sitting oddly. All that was left was to wait. He decided to spend the time cooling down from the hike and cleaned up a bit. Baxter cleaned up the AC and washed his face with a damp towel. He collected a bucket of ice from the hallway ice machine and treated yourself to some crisp water. About 30 minutes after the order was put in, a knock rattled on the door. Baxter volunteered to get it. Hello. He opened the door and let in a waiting staff member. The employee rolled in a cart carrying literal silver platters. They set out the food on the table for you. Please enjoy your dinner. Let us know if you need anything else. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Privately, you were impressed by the fanciness of the presentation. The staff member made their farewells, leaving you to your meal. You reconvened around the table once more. This food comes from the restaurant in the hotel. It's not a small operation preparing it. Oh? Chatting and chewing happened in turns. The topic inevitably came to your preferences for food. Everyone always talks about fries and ice cream going together well, but honestly, they're missing out on the obvious. Fries and whipped cream are even better. It's still the sweet and salty combination, but you don't have to deal with cold fries. That wasn't even the first strange food he brought to the conversation. He started off with something innocuous and then slipped in an oddity to watch your reaction. How many were real and how much fell into the realm of 60% unique plants, i.e. complete and utter nonsense? Have you ever thought of trying fries with pies? You don't think I'm being serious? No, you didn't think he was serious. It takes a lot more to find good flavor combinations than rhyming. If it worked like that, then nothing would ever go well with oranges. Sure, Baxter. After many food admissions that made Baxter either the king of weird taste buds or a reigning jester, dinner came to an end. When you glanced at the clock, you found that it was later than you ever would have guessed. It had been a long day, especially for you, since you were up earlier than he was. Sitting back in your chair, you stretched your arms up. Your legs were feeling the effects of traipsing uphill for miles. A yawn bubbled up when your phone rang. Who'd be calling you at this time? Pull out your cell phone to check if it was anything that mattered or a spam call. Liz's name showed on the screen. Right, of course, your sister wouldn't wait any longer for the mandatory check-in. You were late. At least you hadn't jumped straight to the police.
In that case...
You're welcome to answer that if you'd like. I can give you privacy. No, it's my sister. You don't have to go anywhere. You tapped the screen to answer the call and put it on speaker. That way both of you could say hello. Hey, Liz.
Hey.
Surprise check-in, Jules. Are you still alive? Did that Victorian-era emo man give you any troubles? Yes, I live. Unless you were a zombie, there was no way you'd be answering the phone otherwise. Baxter was already leaning on the table with his elbows propped up on the counter. Now he lazily rested his chin on one of his fists.
Hello.
That's certainly a unique description. I can't say I've ever heard the likes of it before. Oh. She paused. Liz was now aware that she said that in front of the so-called Victorian-era emo man.
So what?
I stand by it. Hello to you, Baxter. I'm making sure that everything is well with my little sibling. You understand. I do, completely. Fine, so again, what are you doing? We just had room service for dinner. Sheesh, lucky. I had to make my own dinner, like a peasant. Sorry, you'll survive.
Rude.
What is this, your let them eat cake moment? Despite Liz's retort, you could hear her muffle a cackle. Maybe I don't want to survive, I want to thrive. Like you and your nobility boyfriend. Not my problem. The two of you went back and forth a while longer while Baxter watched with increasing entertainment. Anyways, clearly you're still breathing, so I'll let you go. It'd be discourteous to keep you from your suitor any longer. She spoke in a mock formal tone, poking at Baxter. He playfully responded. How gracious of you, Miss Hunt. You are indeed a gentlewoman.
Bye.
See you tomorrow, kiddo. Bye, Liz. See you then.
Take care.
I will. Make sure you take care of them. On that slightly threatening note, Liz hung up, but Baxter's lips twitched upwards. Your family is charmingly protective. I realize that more and more every day. Protective, more like annoying. I'm glad you're willing to put up with it. It's not a problem. I am nearly a stranger, and I cannot deny that I'm imposing a great deal on your free hours. It's good to be cautious.
Honestly.
And truly, I do like your family, at least as much as I can from the little we've interacted. Speaking of, he lifted his head and his hand fell under his chin instead. He furrowed his brow. In general, I would never dare to be this presumptuous, but I cannot deny that I'm deeply curious about you as a person. So I'll venture to ask if you'd be willing to share more about your family history. Oh, it made sense. Your family wasn't a mother and a father who had children born to them. You knew that much. There were more ways than one that you all could have come together. You didn't remember ever explaining anything to him. That's fine, I don't mind talking about it. You could at least give him the highlights. Baxter humored many of your questions about him. Getting to know each other better was a two-way street. I'm adopted, and Liz is too. We're from different places and were adopted at different times. We weren't even born in the same country. It's amazing that we met each other at all. But we both were really young. We spent almost our entire lives together.
I see.
Well, it's fantastic how you have made your own beautiful family. Thanks, Baxter. His words made you feel warm inside. You respected how easily he took it. It made you wonder about his family situation. He had been rather close-mouthed about it so far. And again, the two-way street analogy came to mind. Are you and your parents blood related? Oh yes, we certainly are. His voice took on a certain amused bent. His lips stretched thin. My parents might have well been through with me many times over if I wasn't their own flesh and blood. Before he could ask what he meant by that, he chuckled. Sorry, no, that is me being dramatic. Their family and I'm their son. That is what matters at the end of the day, blood related or not. That's true. Very true. Okay, it's nice your parents care about you. You wouldn't voice a flicker of worry. I'm thankful for that as well.
Now.
If it wasn't the boy they raised together in any capacity, if I wasn't the boy they raised together in any capacity, then there would be problems. He laughed some more and brought his fingers to his lips. That topic was over. Well, he pulled up the collar of his roommate's shirt. His gaze searched out the room's ticking clock.
Good night.
It has been a delightful day, but I should not linger forever. There is much to do tomorrow. Good night, Jules. He stood with a slight wave, grabbed his bag to go. We're gonna go with this one. You wondered how long it would take for him to remember whose room this was. Baxter left without another word. The door swung shut behind him. You sunk lower in your chair, getting comfortable as you waited for his inevitable return. Any moment now he'd come tiptoeing back. Almost as if on cue, the door slammed open. Baxter came through it, walking stealthily with the most forced smile possible. This one's my room. The other is yours. Your laughter burst like a dam, flooding his room. Ah, you were aware. Baxter's voice was polite, but laced with embarrassment. He'd been gone long enough that he wondered if he'd actually tried to use his key on your room and failed. Rather than pushing him any further, you got to your feet. With you moving to leave, Baxter found his shoes very interesting. I hope you get some sleep. Baxter hesitated to reply. He paused, sensing that he would answer. You just need a little more time to choose the right words. Well, I do intend to sleep, but in truth, I don't expect it will be soon. I will be packing after you take your leave, and after that, who knows? What do you mean? What else could you do? Baxter chuckled and tapped his foot. I said, who knows, didn't I? You frowned, defeated. He snorted at you, and it was difficult keeping a straight face.
All right.
Okay, this is not exactly correct. I'll admit I know myself fairly well. I also am aware of a drink station in the lobby that is open at every hour. There's also a fire that stays lit all throughout the night as well. I'm expecting that instead of being in bed like a proper young man, I will end up in the lobby with a cup of tea. Would you mind some company? Hot drinks by the fire sounded lovely. You hoped that he was fine if you wandered down yourself.
Oh?
He narrowed his eyes and his smile curved up more. Am I the bad influence here, or are we enablers to one another? Enablers. Yes, I thought so. Well, we haven't got off the rails yet, so I believe we should be fine. His amusement was tangible, and you were already looking forward to the next outing. I'll text you when I've made it to the lobby. His eyes twinkled with a familiar mischief. You'd keep up your phone close. Good night, Jules. For now. With that, you twisted the handle and left. You made it to your own identical room, conveniently right next door. Okay, so they are identical. The door's deadbolt clicked shut behind you, and you flicked on the lights. Despite the new illumination, the suite was not as bright as Baxter's room. How was Baxter's room so lively while yours was this? You sat on your cold bed and sighed. The familiar carpet was spread beneath your feet. The walls were unmatched. The same pictures were attached to the wall. Physically, there wasn't a difference. The change was the fact that now you were by yourself. After spending all day with Baxter's grin, you were lonely in its absence. But at least that wouldn't last long. You'd see Baxter again soon, one way or another. The last and only full day of your mini vacation was drawing to a close, and the warm night pressed black and silent against the window panes. You tucked yourself into bed for a break, but had left all the room lights on. You didn't want to fall asleep yet, naturally. You whiled the minutes away by counting the plates on the ceiling. Eventually there came the jingle of a text arriving. Unlocking your phone, you saw that Baxter sent you a message. It was short and to the point. "I'm downstairs." He'd finally finished his packing. There was no need to respond. He knew you were coming. He wiggled out from under the covers and hopped off the bed, eager for the secret meeting. You crept into the hall, which was brightly lit, although all the other patrons were holed up in their rooms for the night. The staff remained at the front desk. It was dead quiet and still. As you patted your way downstairs, the omnipresent silence seemed like it was something you could touch, a thin blanket swaddling you. Your footsteps and breathing felt muffled. In spite of that, the air was fairly cold. The grand foyer had high ceilings, and the mezzanine floors, a wide open space, invited a permanent draft. A central fireplace might come across totally pointless in the middle of summer in California, but that wasn't giving it its due. Now blazing bravely against the chill, it was a welcome beacon of comfort. Surrounding the hearth was a raised stone platform. There you could see a lone seated figure silhouetted against the flames. It was Baxter, warming himself by the fire. So, over here. A paper cup was clutched in his hands, a pale film of steam rising from it. Hadn't changed into his pajamas, still sporting that khaki interloper. He must have counted on nobody else being around to see the horror that late. The dull thud of feet on the carpeted floor heralded your approach. His portrait smoothly transitioned from a profile to a three-quarter view. His eyes met yours, and he grinned. "Jules, glad you could make it." Rolling the thin cup slowly between his palms, Baxter jerked his head over to one side, drawing your attention to a long table up against the far wall.
Very well.
"The drink station's over there, if you care to partake. A beverage of some kind might be just the thing to top up our late-night rendezvous." "Sure thing, I'll be just a sec." After crossing the lobby, you stood in front of the refreshment bar. It's covered in a thick tablecloth the color of fresh snow, and a neat arrangement of clean crockery had been laid out on top. There were a couple of jugs of hot water and a wide selection of different drink packets and, individual tea bags. Next to those, two more urns of pre-made coffee had been labeled regular and decaf. A carafe off to one side seemed to have spiced apple cider. The menagerie of liquid containers was completed with three smaller silver ones, each containing a different kind of milk. They weren't stingy on the options, that was for sure. You decided to go for cider. I mean, we're up in the mountains in a mountain lodge. It's almost required to have the hot cider. Picked up a cup and poured yourself a measure of the cider. It had been heated, and you were treated to a complex bouquet. Apple cinnamon, of course, though you had some trouble placing all the fragrances. You snapped on a lid and ambled over to the fireplace again. Baxter raised his drink to tap it gently against yours. "Welcome back. What's your poison?" "I went for a bracing cup of peppermint tea myself." "I got cider." "Delightful." A momentary flash of realization crossed his face, and then he let out a huff of amusement. "It appears we find ourselves out to drinks yet again, Jules. I must apologize for the lack of originality. I promise I do other things in my spare time occasionally." It really was starting to become a theme with the pair of you. You snorted quietly into your cup. Baxter scooted over on his perch, patting the stonework with his free hand to indicate that you should take a seat beside him. You plopped yourself in front of the fire, relishing the cozy glow on your skin and the heated slabs beneath you. Baxter was staring absently into the grate. As you sat there with him, enveloped in the warmth of the fireplace and the closeness of his presence, you felt I'm not sure. So, I grabbed a bunch of dice, and none of them are a 4. There it is. There's a 4D. Okay. Yeah, I haven't really looked for my 2D. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. You two were a flame. You couldn't have slept in a million years. Baxter slowly sipped his tea and then set his cup down next to him. It's funny, more than once on this little excursion I found myself forgetting that I was supposed to be on a summer vacation. Especially right now, curled up in front of a fire, cradling a cup of something hot. Excuse me. It puts me in mind of long autumn nights, when the days are beginning to waste away to nothing. And this decor, too. The wood, the stone, the grandeur. Might have believed myself to be back in my childhood home in Oregon. Really? He lifted a leg up onto the edge and tucked his knee under his chin, still focused on the burning light. His expression was distant, wistful. Yes, it's one of the reasons I chose this hotel, as a matter of fact. Though I never lived in a building on this scale, the effect is similar. You could say that I was raised in a big, cool house. Cool in the sense of impressive rather than underheated. That was what my friends used to call it. I loved it when they would come and visit. There was scarcely anything better. They never got over their sense of awe, and I ate it up. I liked to think myself special in those days. To be young and innocent. His features melted into a form that was more familiar, a curt little smile. How strange. Usually I find indulging nostalgia to be an unpleasant endeavor, but here and now, it's easy, and it's nice. I suppose it's because for once I could share my thoughts with another person rather than ruminating on the past by myself. His eyes peeked askance to yours before returning once more to the flames. We'll go full. We're gonna whole blast it here. You let yourself rest fully against him, one cheek to the crown of his head. He leaned into it and gave a sigh of pleasure. It made him happy. It hasn't been easy to find anyone to reminisce with, not for a while. But then again, I only developed the sentimentality once I'd gone off to college. I was too young and proud for that sort of matter before then. There wasn't anything in my life to harbor much sentimentality for, I suppose. I suppose leaving was a catalyst. Isn't it always? But once that part of my mind has developed, there wasn't anyone around to share the emotions with. My classmates and I, we don't have that kind of relationship.
Well,
Now this may be a complete shock to you, but I've been told that it can come across as a bit too forward. I know, it can be hard to believe. Your face cracked into a grin. Understatement of the year, anybody? My intent is to be open with people so we can connect. It almost never works out that way, though. I had to come to terms with the fact that I don't possess a knack for making friends. It was obnoxiously easy when I was a child, especially due to that aforementioned big, cool house, but I keep finding myself at a loss for how to do it. But the hit or miss endeavor, the vast majority of the time I come up with a miss. Only lately it's been different. Incredibly different. I almost worry my luck won't last. His voice had dropped to a low murmur, barely audible over the crackling wood in the grate. It will all be over soon. It was an echo of what he'd said after your hike this afternoon, but this time it went one small step further.
I wish I could stay.
Oh, baby. I want to hug him. Can I hug him? Let me hug him. His eyes were closed now, and a shallow crease that appeared on his forehead. You understood that I was talking about much more than your short stint in this hotel. You could visit again someday. Maybe, but who knows, really? He lapsed into silence once more, becoming engrossed in his own thoughts. You found that you were doing the same, disparate emotions drifting in and out of clarity. You both lingered a while longer, but your cups had been emptied and the fire was getting low. Baxter sighed.
But
Unfortunately, we best call it quits here. We can't save off the morning by avoiding sleep altogether. Yeah, I guess you're right. You got up from the fireplace in unison. At some point, you started holding hands, so you couldn't remember when. You climbed the stairs and walked down the hall in companionable quiet. Pausing in front of the doors to your side-by-side rooms, Baxter cleared his throat, letting his hand fall from yours.
thank you.
Once again for your company, Jules. It's been an enjoyable evening. Until tomorrow, then. His back was to you as he reached into his rear pocket, fetching his key card. You were still conscious of that restlessness when sitting by the fireplace. Your blood was hot under your skin and your heart was beating, strong and insistent. Your insides were stinging with a kind of want, a desire that took the form of the man in front of you. There was a choice you might make if you dared to ask. Hey, Buzzard, you gotta sleep right now? It's a short trip to my room. Baxter swiveled, one hand still in his pocket. His eyebrows had quirked upwards, his mouth bowed in a sweet V of a smile. What, missing me already? Much as I hate to say goodnight, it wouldn't be sensible to continue our tryst any longer, wouldn't you say? We can speak more tomorrow. What if that's the point? To do something not sensible? He stared at you for a second or two, frowning slightly. You watched as his porcelain complexion was gradually colored with the merest shade of red. His eyes narrowed. I see. He let out an unguarded laugh, like he caught him completely on the back foot. His focus dipped for an instant to your mouth, and he swallowed. If the invitation is open, a brief visit could certainly be arranged. He found his hand again with yours, pulling him over to door 194. He let himself be led, his grip eager. Together you slipped into the bedroom. Inside, Baxter politely shut the door and less respectfully rested his spine up against it. His pupils had gone wide in his soft brown eyes. He waited. You took a moment to take it in, the curves of his legs, the boyish set of his shoulders, the swept strands of hair at the nape of his neck. It increased that niggling tension tenfold, a hook at the base of your skull. It tugged at you more keenly than ever, perhaps because you knew this was temporary. Baxter wouldn't be near enough to touch for much longer, but you wanted whatever you could have. We're gonna just jump in here. You pressed immediately into the door, catching his mouth with yours. He let a hushed grunt as his head bumped the wood, but it spiraled down several octaves, transmuting to an excited half-grunt of pleasure. You pinned him there, your body's flesh. The kiss was volatile, dangerous even, a heady concoction born of pressure and heat and short, sharp gasps. Every so often it would slosh over the sides, but the mess was part of the enjoyment. He smelled faintly of sweat and shampoo, and there was peppermint on his tongue. Over and above it all, there was a floral scent that clung to his skin. It was a fragrance you had experienced before when he let you borrow his shirt, his favorite cologne perhaps. It was obvious Baxter liked your hands on him. It was in the way he moved underneath your touch, his legs and his hips and his torso shifting in an unconscious stance. Your bodies intertwined in stages. Baxter caressed the back of your head with his slender fingers, his other arm around your waist. Your palms were to his chest, fingers clutching at the shirt fabric. He pulled briefly away at this, apparently tickled by something. You caught a flash of his canines. It's probably too late to return the shirt to its rightful owner. I have too many memories wrapped up in it now.
It's settled.
My roommate will simply have to learn to live without the eyesore. Well, I'll get him a new one. You both shook with suppressed laughter, holding each other in the stillness of your hotel room. Let's go with this unique option, because you don't get an option like that. Leaned in to press your mouth to the mole on his neck. Heard him let out a gasp and felt his throat quiver under your tongue. His pulse was there, a rapid, passionate beating. Ah! You glanced up to see his eyes half-lidded, and he peered down at you with an expression of complete fascination. He laughed again, the sound as clear as a stream.
You're very good.
You certainly know what you're doing, Jules. But before he could continue, there was a squeeze of a hand on your shoulder. Baxter's broken away, his grip tender but firm. His face turned, his eyes falling to the door handle beside him. This was only ever intended to be a short encounter. That was the pretext he'd given. It's time to say goodnight. For real this time. You reached for the handle, making to leave. Baxter nodded slowly, his attention only half there. You remained in a sort of daze from what had transpired. You're experiencing something similar yourself. You slipped into the hallway again. Baxter's gaze went with you, but you pulled the door shut, blocking his view, and let out a long, calming breath. You patted yourself down, hunting for wherever you'd stashed your keycard, and happened to glance up at the number you had exited through. Your attempt to be subtle was immediately breached with a spluttering noise. You were holding the card for the room you just left. You jumped Baxter inside your own room. You scrambled to unlock the door again, bursting through to find Baxter standing exactly where you thought it was, staring at you. He hadn't moved an inch. So I should probably. You heard the exchange places, Baxter finding himself in the entryway while you settled back inside your own room. It's an embarrassing shuffle the two of you performed. Then Baxter shook himself down, the mortification sliding off in favor of his usual assured self. He hovered with his hand on the latch. Okay, so yeah, I deliberately picked the option where you forgot which room you were in. Just because it was just, after that, your brain is not functioning. So it makes sense that that would happen. And plus, it kind of makes up for what happened before. Thank you for the wonderful, no, sublime invitation. It's been extraordinary. You invited me here first, don't forget. I should be thanking you. His eyes twinkled with silent laughter. Mutual sentiment can be a wonderful thing. And with that, he was gone. The door swung shut as he went, the lock engaged with a dull thud, its sound cutting clean through the storming tension that had strung the air. Without thinking about it, you found yourself drawn over to the bed. Your head was totally empty. The last thing you registered before surrendering to the embrace of sleep was the cool sensation on your tongue, the lingering taste of peppermint. A new day greeted you suddenly and without warning, sunshine streaming in through the windows. The curtain simply stood there and let it happen. You'd forgotten to draw them shut. The end to your miniature holiday had come. You promptly got out of bed and began to pack, following your usual routine as best you could. You didn't end up seeing Baxter again until after 11 o'clock. As promised, he'd taken a lie-in after burning the midnight oil and had to make a last mad dash in order to check out at noon. Luckily, you managed the departure without too much of an issue. The two of you loaded up the car and set off for home. Home for one of you, at least. While you were returning to your normal life, Baxter was instead exchanging one kind of vacation for another. Or maybe you thought watching the California landscape drift past the window, Baxter was leaving his own version of normal behind right now. The Mountainside Lodge had been home away from home for him, a simulacrum of his life in Oregon, much more familiar than a sleek condo by the sea. Continuing to reflect on this as the road rolled out before you. Occasionally you would swap comments with Baxter on random subjects, at other times retreating into the privacy of your own head. Rapidly, your time up on a mountain was fading into memory. You were lucky you decided to have seen a small piece of Baxter. He had entrusted to you a shard of himself, a tiny spark of light shining from somewhere deep inside. You understood him better, even if only a fraction. That was probably the only glimpse into the real life of Baxter Ward that you'd get. And that's it. Okay. Saving. Okay, it's a little earlier than I usually leave it, but no point in starting another moment. It's probably going to be just as long. So I'll go into the menu. Still no pictures. I think I'm going to have to look up how to unlock the CGs. I think at least one is going to be during the epilogue. Or the last moment anyway. Yeah, during that, I think at least two are going to be during the epilogue. So maybe because that was the case with Derek's. Let me show that. Because I think, yeah, this was during the end of step 2. And then these two are both during the epilogue. So I'm assuming something similar is going to happen with Baxter. So, yeah, thank you for joining me. I don't know when, if I'll be able to stream tomorrow or Tuesday. Definitely not Wednesday, but I will definitely be back next Sunday to play that last moment and then on to the epilogue. Luckily with the Baxter DLC, since the DLC takes place during the third step, I don't have to play through another step before going on to the epilogue. So, yeah, so that's it for today. Thank you for joining me. The video should go up on YouTube later this week. I'm not sure when. Because I predicted last week it would go up on Saturday and it went up on Wednesday. Anyway, yeah, take care everyone and have a great day whenever you watch this. Bye.